What's up guys, FLOWSHIZZLE here, and this is your Astra Main's guide to Split. Now for credentials, I peaked Radiant 98, primarily playing Astra and any controllers that were meta at the time. Split in particular is one of Astra's best maps. So let's start off with the question, which site should you be playing? In general, Astra works best on A. Now the biggest reason is that you can easily bottle up all the enemies outside of the A main choke. For example, putting a star hell makes it super easy to just play map, wait for them to come through, you pull, and then you swing and you get the kills. Holding B site is by no means bad, and to be honest, Astra could hold either site, but the idea is that B site might be better suited to something like Raze or Cypher, and leaving Astra to anchor at A. So let's talk about the different star defaults. We're gonna start with the most basic, which is 2 on each site and 1 in mid. So the 2 on A you would want is 1 here, 1 mid, and then 2 for B. So if you watch my Astra Main's guide to Astra, you'll understand that the back one is for the smoke, and the one in the front is when they run through the smoke, they immediately come into some sort of ability, usually a gravity well. And that's on either side. The mid one is just to help your teammates keep more control of mid for a longer amount of time and draw out the round. But I will say this is the one I use the least. I base my playstyle off of the meta, and currently mid abuse is a big thing attackers do on the map Split. So instead of having 2 stars B, I'll actually for once pull back the smoke star and just have 1 B right outside. And I'll have the second star somewhere around here. And the reason is because at my elo, teams generally have realized that pushing B on its own is a bad idea. It's a very narrow choke. With 1 star, the heaven players and the site players can both swing on this choke and get a bunch of kills. So normally the logical way to hit B is usually through a split or through a heaven push, which is why I convert more of my resources to holding mid rather than to holding B. I generally feel like this is a good enough star, as when they're coming out, I can just pull from my teammates on B. If there's a sage wall here, they can break it, and then they can pretty easily hold the site. Mid is much harder to hold, so I commit more resources there. All right, now we're gonna talk about some site holds. Star here, and here. And then I would gamble 1 defensively here, and then 1 over here. So this is what I call the aggro A hold, and the idea is that I want to stop them in this area by the ult orb. I usually only do this if I have a second player with me on A, so usually that's a ramps player. That's going to be peeking bottom ramps right after the barrier drops. So the moment I can, I'll throw this smoke up, and I'll be holding from a position like this, or back here, and the idea is to make sure that they don't push through this. And that the moment they do, you're going to pop your abilities, a pull, and then a concuss. Now, trust me, this gets a crap ton of kills, and the fact that you're holding a crossfire with you here, and your ramp player swinging, anyone coming out of this smoke is going to be at a severe disadvantage. This essentially just stops any aggro A pushes. If they decide not to push it, I'll actually pull back these 2 stars, and I'll wait and play passive, spotting only for information until my stars come off cooldown, and then I'll revert back to a default. Now, the reason for this is usually the fact that if they're not rushing A, then I'm probably going to want my A ramp player to shift toward helping mid. So in that case, if they rotate toward vent, I don't feel comfortable solo holding this. So I'll do a more passive play. I'll switch up my stars like this. That way, I can still spot when they come out. I smoke. My teammates will rotate through vents. And this way, I can still defend the A site without overextending. Now, as for the mid star, there are 2. The normal one is something like this. The more passive one is something top heaven. So this one works really well with the sage wall, because sage wall early mid, and then you throw the smoke, which essentially there's a big gap here, but with the sage wall usually there's not as much of a gap. This allows your team to play more aggro and stack more players. You could have like 2 male side and 1 like pushed up here vents or something like that, and you guys can aggressively hold mid, because that's the benefit from me being able to solo anchor A. I only need to be here to call an early rotate, and this earlier ramp player can rotate to play toward vents to help out mid, because on split it is a very big deal. In the case that we're a man down or the vents player is still just deciding to stay A, I'll actually have my star around this area. 1, if they decide to hit through B heaven, I can kind of just smoke it, which is the easiest way to kind of help stop a rush. Usually you'll have 3 toward the B site, because remember, we have 1 ramps, we have me on the A site or you on the A site, and then we have usually 2 heaven and 1 on the B site. So it's usually 3 stacked toward B, meaning 2 are usually holding heaven. So having a star here is very important. If you have a Raze on your team that's playing B heaven, this is perfect, because they'll call for the suck, and then you can throw the nade off of this cloud, or the Raze will, and it'll bounce in and kill anyone that's fragile, stalling the push super hard. As for a retake, I'll still keep these two because these are always solid. Even on a retake, you're trying to get one pick and get out. So I'll have these two here to help assist with that. I'll do my 2B, alternating between this one or this mid one, depending on how I feel. And then I'll keep one on my belt. That way I can react to what needs to be done. And that's more of an aggressive star. So I'll literally try to place it right on the pathing that they're taking. So this requires you, like I said before, taking and paying attention to the minimap to see how far where they're running and trying to stop them in their tracks. Literally making it very awkward, because imagine you're running through like mail, for example, all of a sudden a star pops up and then instantly a concuss happens. It ruins the kind of pathing that the enemies want to take and kind of kills momentum depending on how fast you can do it. Now, in terms of star management, because the map is literally one of the smallest maps in the game and the rush distances aren't very far, you're realistically trying to move stars as minimally as possible. If the round is drawn out, then yes, you're going to want to shift stars for the site that you think is going to be hit. In that case, I recommend using this rule of thumb. Number one, has there been noise made at your site? If there hasn't, then take away the stars from your site, especially if you had heard noise at the other site. Number two, take a look at the number of players. If your B site is already stacked with 3 players or 4 players, or something like that, then you're going to want to make sure you commit more stars to the other site, because it's kind of overkills, overstacking all your utility on one site, and rather than spreading it out a little bit more thin. If there's noise on B, more stars on B. If there's no noise on A, more stars on B, and vice versa. Kind of think of it like that way. Use the hints that the enemy is giving you. Yes, they can throw a fake, but play on the side of a higher probability where fakes aren't as usually common in rank. On the attack side, what should your star default be? And there's only one thing you need to remember. It makes it super easy for you, and that is to always, literally always, unless your team has called some sort of strat, as much as you can, take mid control. And the way that Astra can almost guarantee it every round is 1 star for vents, 1 star for mail. And this is a very simple one. You can go even further and having a 3rd one up here if you want, but that is more optional. So the idea is this one, smoke. This one is for a pull, but can also double as a smoke. So, for example, your team is taking mid. They try to aggro push mail with a flash, and you see that, you just pull it, and stopping their entire rush as they're just fragile and them is killed, right? They can't really swing past that. Perfect. Now they need to back up. They need to give you the space. You guys can throw a nade, I don't know, something like that. You guys can clear this way more easily. When I said that this can double as a smoke, sometimes you can throw a smoke like this. You guys go here, you guys slowly take up mail, maybe you need to break a sage wall or something, and then all of a sudden this smoke is gonna eventually fade, and you might decide, hey, I don't really want to go B. Throw this smoke up, and now you can go through vents. Obviously, you would like to do it once the smoke fades, but yes, you can now pivot from going to a B hit to now heading toward A. This kind of gives you the flexibility. And you're going to see how you can't really read into what they're doing, because it could be used as a pull or it could be used as a smoke. The last one is the one up here. So now you're going to see, you're going to have this smoke. You're going to take mid and you're going to want something like a pull up here. If you've cleared out mail, this makes it really hard for any of the defenders to really want to try to fight here, which they love doing. And makes it much easier for your team to get into mail, applying a lot of pressure, because you have to think, where is the next best spot a defender can realistically play that is safe? It's usually maybe back here and back here. Yes, this is a spot, but keep in mind that this is much risky, and this is essentially a one and done. As for your positioning on the attack side, rule of thumb, controllers, just don't go in first. Make sure you're at least the 2nd or 3rd person in. Obviously, if the round dictates that you need in, or if there's some extreme benefit for you running in. For example, there are times where you just kind of are just ahead of the rest of the team. You get a pick early and you realize maybe there's enough information that says, oh, there's no one else on B. Then you're just gonna run it. You're just gonna gun it. And that matters more than your positioning. But if it's a slow round and you're playing it slow, getting picked early sucks. The amount of things your team can do will be much more limited. So try to stay alive if you can. Next is, off the bat, if you're doing this mid default after you smoke, you're kind of wanting to pay attention to sound cues or the minimap, like most likely both. For example, you see on the minimap, your teammates like here, spot someone in mail, you can pull here. That's perfect timing. Sound, another thing is you hear a sky flash, right? Pops and your teammates are blind, you pull then. You hear a raise pop, oh, you pop then. These are all good sound cues to dictate when to pull, and sometimes it really does have a lot of value. When an example, a raise wanted to satchel out and with her rocket, and then all of a sudden, because you heard the cue, you pull it, and then it messes up with her satchel, and then therefore she can't swing with it, and your teammates gain the extra second to get out of line of sight. It's pretty big. So let's talk about XX for either site. Normally, the 2 smokes for a straight B hit, which is one that I don't recommend because it's very hard. I guess if you had a Sage Wall, it makes it a little bit easier, but it's the smoke heaven and smoke CT. The way to do this properly is you make sure you see how there's 2 rings, 2 circles. The most outer one is for ability. So like Gravity Well and the Nova Pulse. Those are the larger ring. The inner ring is the smoke. So I line up the inner ring with the edge, which you can see, which means that if I go out, it should perfectly cover heaven. There you go. What's up, y'all? Future Flow here. This is actually incorrect, so thank you to OD26 on TikTok for bringing this up, but the idea is that actually the inner ring is the concuss, the outer ring is the pull, and there's actually no ring for the smoke. He explains this really well in the TikTok, so check him out there if you want to know the specifics, but the idea is that there is no real smoke ring. In the case that you're trying to figure out where to smoke, you can use the inner one. It's the closest to what it would be. It's just slightly smaller. In my personal experience though, I've used the inner ring as a metric, and for the most part, it does its job. And if it did fail, I probably at the time thought it was just me misplacing it or misclicking. So for your future games, just understand that it is slightly smaller than the inner ring and use that as a metric. So these 2 are the normal smokes. Now, how do you want to hit the site? So it depends. If you have a Sage Wall here that allows you to cross, I won't prioritize anything for this area because I don't think it matters as much because you don't really have to worry about it. I will prioritize that we don't get swung as we're coming out. So I'll have a star somewhere default and maybe a concussed back sight. If I have the extra star, this one's way more important and this one's kind of whatever. If it's a B split, then you're not going to be smoking out heaven. Don't smoke out your teammates, guys. Smoke out the CT one and you're going to smoke out stairs. And there you're gonna find that this makes it much better. You can smoke it a little bit deeper if you're scared that they're gonna run through it. This one might be a tiny bit better, but keep in mind that there can be gaps that you don't want to give. But either way, they generally work, and you can even get away if you don't have a smoke using a concuss or a pull, because realistically the heaven players don't want to stay in heaven for that long, and just stalling out enough to make sure they don't swing and get onto site is usually good enough. But it depends. Now, if you're splitting, then maybe I wouldn't pull this. I would actually pull somewhere like around here, because players love to jiggle between holding B main and kind of holding for the heaven push. So one right here really counters that, but the other ones work just as well. On the A site, hit normal screens, heaven, use the same ring trick. Those are pretty standard, and I expect you to kind of know that. Now for the stars, it depends. So the one thing I think of is if my jet is dashing in, what would I want? The safest one is always behind map. This will make anyone kind of stuck here while your teammate is pushing up, because they just have to sit and tank it. They're not going to swing out with it. It's a really bad idea. So they're going to hide and wait for the fragile to fade or swing after your teammates are out. So this is the safe one. The one that sometimes you can catch people off guard is when you have the smoke here and then you have a pull here. So essentially you throw your 2 smokes and then you pull. This one does 2 things. It separates anyone from on site from being able to retreat back to screens, and it stops anyone from screens being able to flood out and help their teammates on site. So essentially cuts off the rotate. This one's a little bit I would say a little more risky, because you're kind of assuming things are going to happen, and if they're planning on fighting like map, then you kind of did nothing. You can use your concuss there instead if you have an extra star, but I'm assuming that you only have 3 stars because you likely you should be using your utility earlier in the round. So smoke, pull, you'll see how the rotate between is stuck, so the site player is likely just going to die. Let's talk about some Astra walls. So for the A site, you can go between 2. Realistically, any wall that covers both isn't super great. But it depends on how well your team is really willing to capitalize off of it. So the one that you would want to do that can do for both, this is okay, but you have to keep in mind that, like,
my ult's ready.
enemies love to pop flash through walls, and this gives a lot of real estate for them and a lot of benefit for them to pop flash and run through it, which is why I don't really like this. This comes with a ranked mentality. Maybe if you have a team, you can kind of divert from it, but the idea is that with this wall, ranked players usually it creates a false sense of security. When you have this wall, teammates think, oh, they can't push through it, but if it was a smoke, they're usually ready. Players have generally like learned that, oh, pop flashing through smoke is very common, but through a wall it hasn't quite gotten to that point yet. And this is just a natural human tendency because of the amount of times people would probably get pop flashed through the smoke. They'll just naturally learn. Through a wall it's much less because it's an ultimate, it's not used as often, so this creates a false sense of security, which is sometimes I don't like, right? So if you're gonna do something more safe, you could just do something like this, and while this might seem kind of a waste, think of it as the fact that you can't get spammed while running up. Right, so at least there's a benefit there. Yes, you're still gonna need to smoke something like this, but yeah, just think of it that you can't get spam. Next is you can do the kind of heaven one, which I would recommend trying to block off as much as the rafter as possible. That way it becomes much more risky to pop flash through it, because if they pop flash they can't really swing, they have to jump down to swing. So this kind of makes it a little bit better. Also, it makes sure that even if someone's camping rafters, you can kind of ignore them. And then, yeah, you would smoke out screens. So those are like kind of basic. I don't like using my wall on A. I'll tell you that straight up. It doesn't really seem to benefit me as much. I'll do it kind of out of necessity or just as a bonus, but I don't expect it to do much different or have as much of a success rate as the other ones I will show you. The next one is my favorite, and I did it on an earlier Attack Astra wall video, and this is the value B split. So normally you're gonna want to do this, and you wall towards CT, and the idea is that this wall covers 3 entrances. It covers vents. As you're running up to heaven, it'll cover heaven, and then as you're running down to site, covers spawn. So this one wall covers all 3. Normally you want 3 smokes, and because you only have 2 smokes, you can only place them like 1 at a time, right? So if you smoked out vents, you're gonna need to wait 15 seconds before you can even split B, because you won't have a smoke for spawn later, right? So this wall takes care of it all. It also allows for a very, very fast hit, because think about it, this wall only takes like a second and all 3 are up, rather than comparing if you like, even if you could do 3 stars, you gotta do like that, you have to wait for it to pop to be ready to smoke, and then you just smoke and smoke. This allows, as long as your team is set up, you can instantly capitalize. I will say that there is a way to do it the other way. So you do like this, and then you go towards screens like this, and it kind of does the same job. It allows you to run through vents, go up toward A heaven, and then come out heaven and drop out, and it even involves screens. But keep in mind that like it's usually a slower take, and if you were to do this, you'd likely want to already be in vents, because if you think about it, from here to B site is much closer from here to A site, the distance wise. So that's why if you're gonna do this to A1, you can get away with it, but try to be a little closer to the A site, maybe already inside vents, maybe already down ropes. That way the hit is much faster and there's less of a tell. The next one is one that's really good for just getting the spike down, because it's very hard to really stop. The idea is that you're gonna line up your wall with the edge of this kind of sight box. I also did this in the same Astra wall video, Attack one. Go watch that one if you want to see other maps. But this one will just allow you to get onto site very easily. Realistically, your team just needs to worry about this. Maybe someone who wants to swing this, but this is pretty risky. And then anyone close here, which is also pretty risky. If you really want to mitigate your risk, you can kind of throw a star here, like a star there or something. Pull this one, press this one. I'll like cover literally everything. That one's really good. You're gonna realistically plan for this. Keep in mind, when you throw this wall, you are kind of giving up the site, meaning that you are already planning to play post plant, because this wall works as a double-edged sword if you're pushing through it. So unless you have some coordinated team who wants to flash and push through it, this wall doesn't like gives the defenders this half of sight, but allows you to essentially have a free plant. So as long as your team is ready for it, you know, maybe you double up down here and then you hold for it, all good. For defense walls, you really only need to throw this one for the B site. This is a retake one. You can throw that one there, and then it doesn't matter. You can just literally have a teammate sitting like this, and then someone sticking the default plant, and there's very little someone can do. They run out like this, they're just gonna get mowed down by this. You can't even push like this because this body will be blocking it. And with 2 people, like if they're gonna wrap around the long way, chances are the spike will be diffused by that point. So this wall is super strong for playing retake. it kind of counters the hardest spots if you think about it, because you wall like this, right? Your teammates can flood out heaven really easily, because usually the scary part is like people playing pillar, people playing there, killing you as you're running out, and people playing backside. But this wall blocks it all off, so they can just drop easily and take the site. Definitely really good. The A wall, I have yet to find a really good way to do it without cutting your team off. You probably want to just save your wall for retake on all of this map. If you're coming out screens, you can kind of just like throw a wall like this. And then when you're retaking site, you can just flood out with your teammates through screens, take the site, start sicking it, and then your teammates can post that. Something here, you know, like you see how like you don't have to take as much of the site, you don't have to worry about this map area, and dropping like 2 stars in like this area and like this area, all of a sudden like most of the retake is taken care of. So now for the final part, some tips on the map split. Number 1 is to combo with your Raze as much as possible. Raze is one of the best duelists on this map just because everything is so small. Look at this mid area. 1 nade in the center literally damages here, right? So it's like a big radius, and it stops a mid push literally completely. Comboing a star here just for a pull that also doubles as a smoke later is really good. So this way you can play like hold mid more aggro, stall out longer. Having this one in mail or on the steps is also really good because of this cloud nade. You throw the nade off the cloud like I explained earlier, and it screws up anyone here. Having it something like this is also really good. Comboing with your Killjoy is also very strong. So let's explain. If you double up with your Killjoy, and your Killjoy has, let's see, like kill box like right here and right here, right, with mollies, and then you have a star like right there. When they push through, you pull, the mollies suck, and all of a sudden they're dead. So comboing with any AoE, because this map is so small, is very, very strong. Next is, I would highly recommend being sure that you can move your stars very fast and place your stars really fast, because split itself is very momentum based, and when you get an early pick, you really want to take advantage of it because you're so close to the site already. Being able to place down stars fast, for example, let me run through a scenario. So you do your default stars mid, and then all of a sudden you smoke this off. Your teammate swings, some moron decides to swing male really early in the round because they're, I don't know, they got an ego, they instantly get picked. What you want to do is make sure that you're instantly hopping into these 2 areas to be able to smoke, and then you want to pull this one back so that you can keep it for later, and then that's way you can literally, your teammate just run up and then the smokes will already be there for them. Lagging behind is what gets people killed. The smoke comes up too late, maybe someone's posted here as they're running through, they get a headshot, stuff like that. So timing is very good. Be fast with the Astra stars, but usually that applies on every single map if you can. Split in particular definitely does have a benefit. I encounter a lot of ciphers that like to put their cage here. This is actually across all agents, it doesn't matter. Just take a second to spam. There's a little spot where Cypher, if he's standing on top of this, will jump up and put the cam on this little ledge, and what it does is it allows you to peek it to see if anyone's aggroing here or in screens. And it's a good cam, but you can actually spam it almost before he even sees anything, because you can see it through the barrier. There's a barrier here. You can actually see it stick on the wall there, so when the barriers go down, you can just spam it before it even opens. And my last tip is, don't be afraid to use a lot of stars to take mid. There's not much room in this map, and you really need to use your utility to take room, unlike Ascent where mid is sometimes just given by the defenders. Like, they don't even care, they'll let you walk up cat. In Split, that is completely different. Everyone fights for mid, and that's because the map is already small enough. There's like, what, you're gonna rush out full out B? Yeah, you get slowed once, and then all of a sudden you can't push it anymore. You're gonna come out A? Yeah, you get smoked off, and then there's trips or mollies or whatever on the A side, and all of a sudden you don't want to rush A. And there's also, likewise, if there's another Astra, there's a pull, suck, concuss, whatever, right? So it makes it really hard to just rush through one of the avenues. Realistically, the only one that works is A. B doesn't really work. You kind of need to split. So use your utility. Don't feel like you need to hold it on for anything, because usually rounds end pretty quickly. So maybe you're gonna want to, I will like commit like 3 stars in this area just to make sure that like this area we take as much space, and you're gonna notice how much, like, if we draw the line, you get up to like garage, right? And then if we get heaven control, we get like this half of heaven, and then you're gonna make it really claustrophobic. A-site players are gonna feel very, very enticed to rotate because they're scared of how much space you have, and that a hit can literally instantly come through. Therefore, they're gonna rotate from A to B, making A weaker. As long as you can abuse that mechanic, you will win more split games. That's my last tip. Anyway, if you found this guide helpful, I would much appreciate it if you can hit that thumbs up icon. I stream on Twitch, so make sure you drop a follow there. And if you ever have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. Come to my Twitch channel or follow my TikTok. I post daily there with tips like this. So if you want some short form content, there you go. Make sure you check out the previous videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.